Thanks. It's very nice to be in Zurich. It's my first time here. Yay. So how many of you are actually from here? Oh, okay. Nice to know. All right. So a couple words of introduction about me. I'm a UX designer at Nodejitsu. Who heard of Nodejitsu? Yay! Cool. Awesomeness. I also run the Node firm, the company which makes like events, workshops, and consulting for Node. And I organize Meet.js barcamps back in Krakow, Poland, where I live. So like that's the background. So who can tell me what simplicity is? Come on, wake up. No one? Seriously? Less stuff. Interesting. Anyone else? Huh. What were you saying? Huh. Anyone else? Yeah, that's right. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, so what is simplicity in terms of web design or development? Like, is that the same? What do you think? Anyone? You guys are really like good definition of it. Okay, so today I was trying to buy a ticket for the train, and I was really confused because Marcus told me that I should try this Zurich card. And I'm like, okay, so I checked the machine, and I'm like, okay, 24 hours, yes, that's what I want. And I selected the ticket, and then I wanted to pay. But then there was only a button saying, add more tickets, and I was really confused. And I spent a significant amount of time wondering what I should do with it. There is no button like pay or insert your card or anything. But then I noticed there was a like terminal saying insert your card. So there was like nothing on the screen saying that I should do actually something right now with my card or with my cash, whatever. So that was a kind of like a crappy user experience. No offense, of course. So I spent like 20 minutes wondering how to buy a ticket for the train. And I'm a designer, so that's not a good experience. So we all strive for simplicity, right? We all strive to make the user really content with the app or website we're preparing, so it's really easy for them to achieve the action they want to achieve. So it's basically like freedom from complexity. Not necessarily removing. I think you mentioned that. It's like simplicity is removing something, but not necessarily. Because like, let's say you are designing an app and you say like, yeah, because simple is like, for example, 2 features. Not necessarily. That may lead to user being confused. So for me, like focusing on simplicity and is focusing on the core of the website or app you are designing. It's like compacting experiences in some way, but not necessarily getting rid of features. So it's kind of like making the experience unsophisticated for the user, so like everyone can use it, because you cannot like assume that that every people are familiar with technology. Have you seen the video on YouTube? Normal person trying to use Windows 8? Yes? No? If you didn't, you should check that. It's really funny. I'm not using Windows 8, by the way, right now. So you can also notice that there is a trend in web design and development as well for simple designs. Like if you check the website for mint.com or 37 Signals, you can see that they're very simple. You can see the trend for typography-based designs, for really minimalistic designs. But are they all good? I mean, do they serve the purpose? So you all know the KISS rule probably from the aircraft engineer called Johnson, but not everyone knows that the simple within this rule applies to how complex task needs to be performed to solve some, like, for example, issue with hardware or software. So who can tell me who is like asking themselves a question before they're solving some problem? For example, you're about to start a new project and you're thinking, okay, so maybe I should use a framework for that. So are you asking yourself any questions before you choose a framework, or you're just like, oh yeah, I should use Bootstrap, for example, or HTML5 boilerplate? So is anyone like asking, like trying to justify their decisions before they are like trying to code? Anyone? Hands up? That's not a lot. Okay. So we have all these amazing tools. Like we have all these amazing open source projects which are available for us. But are we using them in the right way? For example, frameworks. Like who has not ever in their life used a framework before? Okay, sorry, you're all using it. Who's using Bootstrap? Okay, who's using Foundation from Zurb? HTML5 boilerplate. Something else? Anyone? Custom written frameworks? Anyone? By themselves? Cool. Good to know. Okay, so you probably all know what framework is. That is like a bunch of snippets of reusable code that you're just like basically that's for your use. That's your own boilerplate. And why they are good? Because they're simplifying your life basically. Because it's more, it's faster to develop, it's more seamless, more efficient. And you have all these good practices from awesome developers within the, like for example, Bootstrap or HTML5 boilerplate. It's created by Paul Irish by Divya, like the best developers you can have. So you're sure that there are like good code practices. And common issues are also addressed because like sometimes you find yourself, for example, fighting with some crazy Internet Explorer bug over hours, and then you're like, no, I just hate it so much. I just like can't deal with that anymore. But then you have this framework which probably solves this issue already because it has been tested. So we have different frameworks, you know, that for CSS grids, for CSS, for PHP. But there are some very important considerations you need to have before choosing the framework. So I ask you, like, do you have like, are you trying to reason your decisions? And like only like 20 people said that, yeah, they are. So what questions can you ask when you are choosing a framework? Like, for example, is it necessary to use the framework for the size of your project? Like, would you use a framework for like 1 or 2 page project? No, that would be stupid. But would you use it for like 50 pages? Probably yes. It of course depends. Does the framework has the features you need? Does it? Or are you just like mindlessly choosing the framework because it's popular or because it's tested? Or does it affect the performance of the app you are designing or website? Isn't it like too bloated with features? It may be really big and really have the features you don't really need. But sometimes, usually you just choose it because it's popular or because it's tested and you're not checking if it has everything you need, just the stuff you need. So we already mentioned like full stack frameworks such as Foundation, Bootstrap, HTML5 boilerplate. I think these are most commonly used. So the problem is that Bootstrap is the most popular repository on GitHub right now. The second most watched repository is Node.js. That's kind of a funny fact. Have you ever tried to check how many lines Bootstrap has? The base CSS file? No? So it has almost 6,000 lines. It's a lot. And to compare it to Foundation, it's only 1,000 lines. I'm not saying that Bootstrap is bad, but you need to adjust what you are choosing to the project you are handling right now. Because like, yeah. Yeah, of course. But then, if you are downloading Bootstrap from the website, yeah, not necessarily, but then you get CSS. And for example, what if you want to work with Sass or less? Yeah, what if someone is using CSS? Yeah, but I've seen that happen. So yeah, I get your point, and you have a very valid point. I'm just like trying to address the issues which I saw happening with many developers along my career. So it's not like I'm saying that the Bootstrap is wrong. So So like I'm saying that many developers aren't checking the size of the library or framework they're using. They're just like, oh yeah, let's use it. If it comes to mobile framework, usually people are using jQuery because it works on mobile, but it was done with thinking about desktop, and Zepto.js. People are also using some UI frameworks such as jQuery Mobile, JTouch, or Sencha-Touch. But okay, so we have these frameworks, and they're so awesome. They're helping us. It's so easy and fast. But of course, there are some drawbacks, of course. So first of all, we have a really big problem with semantics. Because if you're using a framework, you have a bunch of divs and spans nested. And it's really like a crime against HTML5 native elements because they're holding the actual semantic value, like for example, header element or a site. They're holding actual semantic value. And you're just working on a bunch of divs and spans, which have like no semantic meaning at all. And they have really unsemantic naming of classes. For example, span 12 or span 14. I mean, it makes sense for grids. Of course, it makes sense. But it's not semantic. If you look at the markup, you're just like, for example, if you're working in a big team on a project, and it's using some framework with a really complicated grid, and you just joined the project. Okay, so you're looking at the code. Okay, so where the main div goes, and you're searching for 30 minutes. So it's a really not efficient way to handle that. And we chosen to use framework to make our developer life easier, didn't we? But it's not making it easier at all. So the way to address the issue of semantics is to try to add ARIA roles. Because like imagine that you are blind and you are using a screen reader. So imagine trying to listen to the screen reader reading the site with using a framework. Like how can it be read in a proper way if there's like no semantic at all? So you can use ARIA roles and add attributes to meaningful elements. For example, to the div which holds the actual main content, you can add the role main. Of course, ARIA is a whole different topic, and I'm not going to elaborate on that right now, but I'm just pointing out that that's one way of addressing the topic. By the way, that's a really great article by Chris Coyer. So another problem with frameworks is that you need to learn how to use them. Like, even if you are a very seasoned and good developer, you're not able to just like download the framework and you know everything about it. That's just not possible. So you need to think about the time you will spend on reading documentation and learning the framework. You need to get familiar with the code. So you can easily compare the time you're spending on learning the framework and the time you would spend on writing your own framework, because it may be the same. It may be even better to write your own instead of just using someone's like other framework. So for me, it makes sense if you are using the framework a couple of times, if you intend of using it a couple of times, because then you will just get familiar and it will be really easy in the future. But if you will keep switching the frameworks, you will just like kind of waste of time, because you will go through the docs and get familiar with the code, which is usually big, and then you just end up wasting the time. So as Matt Wilcox said in his recent blog post saying why he hates using frameworks, is frameworks are useful for speeding up the production of a project once you've learned them. Another issue you might encounter with dealing with frameworks is override versus override. So if you're working with a framework, are you creating a new style sheet for it, or are you just overriding the framework CSS? Anyone? Who's overwriting it? Anyone? So who's writing a new style sheet? Okay. So these are like two approaches you can have. So you can have a new style sheet overriding the old one, which is easier to manage updates for like open source projects. Like for example, recently Foundation was updated to 3rd version. But it's not kind of efficient because like you are creating another HTTP request and you want to minimize them for production. You can also rewrite existing code. So you can just open, for example, bootstrap min CSS and start writing there. Just override the styles. but it's really hard to manage updates if you are doing that. Also, if you are not really familiar with the framework you are working on, you may end up modifying something and then you will be like, oh, it's not working. Why this thing is not working? I was working on something else. So you don't know the dependencies in CSS, and then you end up just messing around all of your work. The next really important thing, especially in the era of mobile, is heavyweight code. So you all probably are aware that speed and size optimization is very important. So most of frameworks are really lightweight, but often they have a lot of unnecessary code. Unnecessary not in general, but unnecessary for you. So they have many dependencies involved. For example, I'm almost sure that both Foundation and Twitter Bootstrap are relying on jQuery. So, okay, so you go to Foundation website and you're like, yeah, this framework looks great for my project. I would download it. But you don't want to be jQuery dependent. So imagine the situation that you already started developing with Foundation, and then you're like, oh, I removed jQuery because for some weird reason there was jQuery in it. And now it's not working. That's weird. So it kind of creates some problems with dependencies, who are like, sometimes you don't want these dependencies. So for production environments, you need to remember both about being lightweight, remember about code minification. I think that every front-end developer is doing that, but just to confirm, who's doing code minification for production? Yes. Okay, not everyone though. Remember about merging multiple files. How many of you are working with CSS preprocessors? Okay, that's a lot. So that's like two very important considerations, especially if you are working with frameworks. So we have these disadvantages which seem pretty large and we're like, no, maybe I shouldn't be using the frameworks, but there's also some really good things about frameworks. So as I've said, it's really fast to write a website with a framework. It's a reduced testing time as well. It's basically ready, functional code snippet. You're almost sure that it's working everywhere. You don't need to write it yourself. And it's prepared basic styling and templating for you. And testing is very easy because frameworks are open source. They are community driven. So you can just go to GitHub, check issues, and you can see, okay, so this framework has a lot of addressed issues and they are all closed. So it seems that they're working really heavily on that, on improving it. And people are having similar problems, so we can find solutions for them as well. You can go to Stack Overflow. It's tested by authors. It's tested by people using them. So again, you are avoiding the problem with sitting in a dark room and just, I don't know, crossing your fingers. Oh, please work, work. Or for example, like, yeah, Internet Explorer, please work. Yeah. So that's what happens, but usually half of these issues are already addressed in the framework. I'm not saying that you should ditch the testing phase because it's really crucial. You should be doing that, but it's significantly reduced with frameworks. But it's still very hard to test on native mobile devices, and you've seen that on the previous talk. So basically what I was also recommending was to search for local mobile testing labs, and then you can test it on free on various devices. You can also test in the web. For example, there are many, if you're testing responsive web design, you can just like go to responsive.s, for example. There are many simulators as well. They're not 100% reliable, but you can test it. So that makes framework really, they're really speeding the testing process. Also, they're kind of beginner friendly because it's a fast starting point. Let's say that you just become a front-end developer. So you know the basics for CSS, you know the basics for HTML, it's all cool. But you don't know how to start. So like, how should I start this project? Okay, so you're downloading the framework and you can start playing around and learning, like start modifying and even breaking it. And then you will see how it's changing, how it's adapting. So it's kind of a learning experience. You can analyze the code, you know it's like best practices in the field probably. So you can really benefit from that. But another thing which can help you with fastening and simplifying the development process is code generators. It's kind of tricky. Like, you know CSS Free Please or Colorzilla for Gradients probably, right? Are you using any of code generators, or you are just using the code handling and editors? Anyone? No? Yes? Okay, one person. Cool. So I've seen a lot of people using code generators, and it's cool because it's faster, right? But sometimes I've seen no shorthand variants, different specification from W3C implemented, not optimized code, unnecessary vendor prefixes. And sometimes it can be replaced with the handling and editor, like who's using Coda, for example. Okay, so you know that in Coda you can just set, for example, a keyword, and then you will have a code generated for that. So that's kind of like doing the job for you instead of the code generators. But I've seen really many developers using that. So I think that's a problem because they are not aware of these disadvantages, and they're just like blindly following the code that they have generated from them. So another very useful thing is CSS preprocessors. They're very, very popular. And you all, like almost half of the room is using CSS preprocessors, right? So who's using Sass? Okay. Les? Ooh, Les is so popular. A stylus? Has anyone heard of RCSS? It's a new one. Okay, so you all know that they have these amazing advantages. They have mix-ins, variables. It's less to write. It's easier and faster to maintain. And it compares to CSS anyway, so it's not a problem. But have you ever tried effectively debugging with CSS preprocessors? Because I've tried it, and it was really, really hard. But there's a really amazing thing coming up. Already it's implemented in Firefox, and it's implemented in Chrome as well. It's called source maps. Anyone heard of source maps? Yeah, that's not a lot though. So basically, source map already let you debug a CoffeeScript, so you can see when you're, for example, you have a website, and there's a problem with the button you are styling right now. So you go to Web Inspector, and okay, so I need to check what is happening in here. But then, you will see only the output from the merged CSS file. Well, that's kind of crap, because I want to see where it is in less or stylus file. It's especially hard if you are working in a team. For example, recently, I started working on a Nodejitsu internal project, and it's a really good architecture, and it's done in stylus. And I love developing in stylus, but then I go to Web Inspector and I try to find something in CSS, but it shows me the line in like merged file, so where I should find it. And then I'm just spending this time to find it and like whole project. Is it effective? No, it's not. So source maps can address this issue already with CoffeeScript, and it will be soon, we'll be able to do that with less Sass stylus as well. So that's really awesome, because that was like the main disadvantage of CSS preprocessors. It's kind of like a hype club. Because do you remember the time when HTML5 and CSS like surfaced, when it became popular? Like everyone was so excited. Yes, I just want to use the CSS freestyle. It's so awesome. I just need to do a demo for that. This button will look so great. This button is great. So basically, developers tend to like be overexcited with new technologies, and I mean it's cool to be excited. That's how we are. But you need to remember, why are you doing that? Like, why are you using the things you are using right now? You need to stop overusing cool effects just without a reason, because that just doesn't make sense. Usually, like in general in life, you have some reasons for your actions, right? You should have reasons for your actions in development and design as well. Do you remember this really nice website, responsive HTML9 boiler strap? That's what I'm talking about. So, yeah. So basically, what you should do when you are choosing, when you are starting a project, for example, or if you are starting designing something, you can ask the right question. Of course, I'm not saying that these are the best questions you should ask. These are questions taken from my experience, and I found it very useful. For example, such easy questions like, why am I doing it? Can I use some other tool instead? Is this the tool I'm using right now? Is it the right tool for the job I'm doing right now? Should I be writing my own code, or should I be using something which is already done, for example, on GitHub? Will it affect the page load? Will it affect the optimization of it? Will it affect the usability of the website? These are all questions you can ask. And I think they will be very useful in the future when you start developing. Another thing to remember is that beautiful will not equal usable. Because probably you have someone read the article at Smashing about hypes in web design. It was a couple of months ago. Anyone? It's a really great article. Very funny. Very funny. Anyways, so you have all this, as I've said, there's all this hype. And it's really cool that people want to do beautiful stuff. That's awesome, because we like to look at beautiful things. But on the other hand, heavyweight, for example, designs not necessarily make the experience better. It may really piss you off, because oh, I'm on slow connection, I'm waiting on this giant graphic to load, and I cannot use the page because it's so big. Oh my god, this is not good. So it make even hard for people to navigate, to use the website or app. So you need to, again, think about optimization, about page speed. You need to think about why are you doing that? Why are you using this graphic? People are blindly following the rules. People are blindly applying design trends, development trends everywhere, and they're not necessarily good and not necessarily justified. And simplicity never equals minimalism. It's I've seen that so many times that people associate simplicity with minimalism. So you need to just get rid of all the features and just leave on the logo and maybe 2 sentences, and that will be good because it's minimalism, and minimalism is great. Minimal can be very hard to use. Remember Amazon website? It's really crazy clutter. It's you're loading Amazon website and where am I? What is happening right now? But apparently, it's very kind of easy to use. I've seen people not experienced in tech and computers at all, and they were oh yeah, it's really easy. I can just buy the book. Oh yeah, it's there. Fine. So it not necessarily means that being having a lot of features or having a clutter interface will be very bad. And the most important thing is being user-centric, because we are asking all these questions to deliver a really great end product, right? We want the user to be happy. So we don't necessarily need cutting-edge features. We don't necessarily need to make it pop out in the user's eyes to make it really awesome and memorable. We need to remember about the user's needs, the user capabilities. We need to remember about browsers they are using. We need to remember about mobile devices. We need to remember about disabled users. We need to remember that some people actually have JavaScript disabled. It's happening sometimes. I've seen that happen. So the main idea, and the title of this talk as well, was simplicity. So what's the best way? Instead of asking all these questions, just don't overdo it. Just don't dive in this pile of amazing tools, because you will just die with it. Just don't repeat yourself, don't overdo it, and keep it simple. But remember that simple not equals cutting up the features. It means making the experience as seamless and intuitional as it can be. So I think that's all. Thank you very much. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer. Anyone?
Can you repeat the question?
Which debugger?
Caroline, you have to...
It's SOAR. It's...
You would have to repeat it so the listeners on the web stream can hear it too.
Yeah, it's source maps. It's a feature, and it's a repository on GitHub too. If you go to github.com/mozilla/source maps, it will be there. But it's not yet done. it only works for CoffeeScript right now, but it will be working in the future. Slides can be found on Speaker Deck. I will update them, and if you want to rate the talk, that would be very helpful. If you have any feedback at all, like any suggestions for the content, I will be really glad to read it. Anyone else? Nope. Yes? No? Okay. Then thank you very much.